feathers in unusual places, and nudges from loved ones from out of the blue. This and more in this episode of the award-winning Real Life Angel Encounters. Angels. We all have them. They're our unseen guides, our companions, our teachers, and they're all around us. Sometimes they make themselves known in the most miraculous ways. Join me, Level 3 QHHT practitioner, angel communicator, and Reiki master, Christy Clemens Hoffman, with stories from real people who have experienced uplifting phenomena and real-life angel encounters. Hello, and welcome back to Real Life Angel Encounters, the podcast for those who like positivity with their paranormal and actual spirits with their spirituality. I'm Christy, your host, and I'm glad to be with you once again. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you that there is still time to pre-order the book of Real Life Angel Encounters. Real people share real stories of miraculous encounters before it launches July 1st. Now, I know many of you might be like me and like to read along with stories and underline and highlight and make notes in the margin. Heck, maybe even give a book to a friend or loved one for a gift. I know I love to get books myself. So you are in luck if that happens to be you. The ebook and paperback are both available on Amazon.com right now and are selling fast. Pre-order now and get the book hot off the presses. And yes, the EPUB is available in Kindle and ebook for whatever device you like to read on. And now I have another announcement that I'd like to share before we get started. Real Life Angel Encounters is now an award-winning podcast. The Women in Podcasting Awards were announced recently, and Real Life Angel Encounters was voted Best Storytelling Podcast. Thank you to all the listeners, storytellers, and supporters of this show for voting. And now on with the show. As synchronicities go, it just so happens that this episode features not one, but two podcasting greats to share their stories. First up, we have Simon Bown, author of Verified Near-Death Experiences, Proof of an Afterlife, and host of the immensely popular Our Paranormal Afterlife. Find him at pastlifeshypnosis.co.uk. Next up, we have fellow author and podcaster Simon Bown to tell his story. Hi, Simon. Welcome to Real Life Angel Encounters. You've got a very interesting story to tell.
Yeah, it was fascinating, and it really knocked me for six, as us English would say. That's a cricketing term.
Oh,
So, yeah, I was recording a podcast with an author who'd written a book about angels. And one of the things she said during the podcast was that, you know, when angels are around, because you see a white feather for some reason. So the next day, I'm walking down the street and this white feather just floats out of the sky right in front of me. And it made me think of what she said, but I thought, it's just a coincidence, it's nothing. And then a few weeks later, I was recording an interview with a medium, and we stopped recording and we were having a little chat afterwards. And I mentioned this thing with the feather, and she said, oh, yeah, the feathers are a really good sign. It could be angels around or something. So we ended the call, and I went down to see my daughter, my teenage daughter. And in the middle of her bedroom floor was a feather, and she's really clean. It's like the floor was empty of stuff. There's just a feather there. And I said to her, where did this feather come from? And she's like, I don't know. She was just playing a game, and so she like looked down and then looked over, I don't know, and doesn't care really, and just carried on with her game. So I thought that's interesting, because just when I was talking to a medium about a feather showing up in a weird way, a feather shows up in a weird way. It was a few weeks later, I was with a medium and we were doing a sitting at her house, and she was sitting opposite me in a big armchair, and the floor between us was completely clear. So she did an hour of mediumship and she was really good, and she finished, and then I started talking to her, because before I went, she didn't know my name. She didn't know anything about me. You know, that's that sort of thing you do with mediums, isn't it? And I was talking to her about this feather showing up. And it was really weird how it done it after I'd been talking to the medium. And then she just said to me, look at the floor. And there was a feather on the floor in between us. And that been completely clean, that floor. Neither of us got up to go anywhere. It was not there the whole hour she was doing her mediumship. It's like it teleported in. It's just something like, I can't even speak now. It just stopped my brain. I couldn't compute where did this feather come from? And it was just again when I was talking to her about feathers and angels and feathers showing up in a weird way. It just seems too much for coincidence. And I wonder if it was something where the angels or spirit guides were trying to send me a sign, send me a message. And I didn't get it the first two times. And they're like, oh man, what do we got to do to get through to this guy? And so the third one, they got through to me and I really took notice of it.
I always say one time is a fluke, two times is a coincidence, though there's really not any coincidences. Three times, take it to the bank. You cannot make this stuff up, Simon.
I know. I just can't explain it. Even today, I think about it. Perhaps maybe it was stuck on the bottom of my shoe or something and it fell off. Then at the same time, we were talking about feathers showing up in a weird way and angels. Maybe if it was on my shoe, then it would have been the angels that orchestrated the events for the feather to be on my shoe and to fall off at exactly the right time. I mean, I don't know how they work.
They work in mysterious ways. And it's not like they're going around and squeezing birds all over the place, drop the feathers here, but it's just like arranging these feathers to be in your path that when you'll notice it. After my dad passed in, let's see, December 2022, gosh, it's been a while. And it was maybe a month after my dad passed. I was talking with my stepmom and my sister on the phone and coming to here to my office. And we were all talking about how much we missed him, what a big presence he was, and everything else. And get here to the office, I open my door to get out, and a feather blows in and lands on my lap. And I know that feathers are often a sign of angels, but I just knew that it was my dad. So he's not an angel. He never was. He'd be the first one to tell you that. But not an angel, but still, I feel like he's sent me that feather, but he sent more. Another time I was leaving my office, got to the car, opened the door, and there's a feather on my seat inside the car. I see
Uh,
them. Isn't that crazy? I see them in my path. I was leading meditation at church a Thursday evening, stand up, and right behind me on the podium, there's a feather that hadn't been there before. You just can't make this stuff up. I mean, probably the best one, my aunt and I were on vacation in Venice, and we were in a restaurant, a little cafe, and we're finished with our meal, and there's a feather right there on the floor in a restaurant in Venice. These things they're real and they happen. And we can choose to look at it as if it's not a sign or if it's very much a sign. And it sounds like yours were very much a sign. Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes wonder, if they're sending a message or it's a sign of something, but I just don't get it because I think, okay, I've got a message, but what is the message? What are they trying to tell me? That's the hard part for me.
Okay. Well, we can look at that in so many different ways as well. What were your thoughts when you saw it or right prior to? Is that something that you need to watch in your thoughts? Is it just a sign that they're around and they're paying attention and they want you to know they're there? I'm sure you're going to find what the meaning is and what the message is. So, yeah, keep looking
Yeah.
for those feathers, right?
Yeah. Maybe it was somebody who died and I haven't made that connection. I just thought of that. Thank you.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sometimes those answers will just pop into our mind when you're not thinking of anything else. And so that, yeah, they could be a sign from someone who's passed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great story. And I love it. We find these signs all the time. Could be a feather, could be a bird, could be an insect or a flower. And we kind of just know that it's not just a feather there. We know that it's a gift or a message or a sign of something else. And so I always say, keep looking, pay attention, keep your eyes and ears open.
And do you feel they always need to be white feathers? Because sometimes you might walk down the street and the feather's not white, but it's still a sign, is it?
I think so. I really do think so. I have found blue jay feathers that are so beautiful, hawk feathers. I've got behind me on the shelf, I've got a vase full of large feathers that I've either found or have collected. So I think that it can be any type of feather.
All right. Because I see ones that aren't white and I think, oh, is that actually a sign or is it just a coincidence? It just happens to be there.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it in an unexpected place or right in front of you as you're going to put your foot down or in a strange and unusual place, like inside a cafe in Venice?
No, it's a lot of the time I'm just leaving the house and maybe there's just one on the floor in front of me. And so you wonder, I see it and I think, is that a sign? Is that a message? And then I'm just not sure. There's lots of birds around and we have a big tree here. And so there's lots of birds in the tree. So I just don't know.
Right,
But
right.
we often have a robin in the back garden. And a medium told my wife, if you see the robin in the back garden, that's your mum coming.
I would take that to the bank as well. I love that. I love that. And yes, we often know that, oh, well, that owl is not just an owl. That is actually a sign from someone, or, cardinals are often a sign of Dolores Cannon, like the late great metaphysician Dolores Cannon often symbolized in cardinals. And so here I am at this office where you can't see out here, but there's a pond and trees and a deck. And, sometimes clients will come in for a QHHT session. QHHT, of course, developed by Dolores Cannon. And the cardinal will show up when they don't show up every day. And I know that that's Dolores saying hi and have a great session.
That's amazing, isn't it? How they can orchestrate these things.
And it's not that the robin is your mother-in-law, but it was sent as a sign. Hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm looking out for you. You can talk to me, right? So it can be just orchestrated. I think is what you said, is orchestrated to be at the right place at the right time. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not think of it as a miracle or a sign?
Yeah, isn't there a saying like that? You can either live your life with nothing as a miracle or live your life as everything as a miracle.
That's actually in my book, Real Life Angel
Yeah, that's
Encounters.
that's where I got it from.
It must be where you got it from. Yeah, I think my next book in this series is going to be about signs, or it's going to include stories of signs that were either sent or stumbled upon by our loved ones and our angels. It's a good subject because everybody seems to have these stories.
Yeah, and coins showing up as well. That's the thing, isn't it?
Do you have that?
I don't, but I've talked to somebody who's had many, many coins, and when they look at the back, the year is their birth year
Wow. Of themselves who found it or of a loved one?
of themselves. But
Wow.
it's like you said, there's no coincidences, and if they're all of the same year, there's something going on there.
I think so too, right? We can look for that meaning in so many different ways in so many different places. Like I said, we just tend to know. For a while there, my dad was sending me dimes because, we all sometimes will find coins in random places. People carry change in their pockets. It falls out. It's very natural and normal. But when it's consistently dimes, or I know someone whose grandmother sent them pennies, when it's consistently pennies all the time, you have to sit up and take notice of that. And I think it's a
Yeah, yeah.
fascinating thing to, just to even think that my loved one is thinking of me, that an angel is watching out for me, and to know that we're not alone. I think that makes a huge, huge difference in everybody's lives.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder how difficult it is for them to make these connections for the spirits, how hard it's for them to place a penny somewhere or a feather. And it's almost like wherever they are could be so different to where we are. Their form of communication is quite abstract and symbolic and weird, and they're doing their best to communicate with us. And it's not like you could say, well, they left a feather. Why can't they just leave a note, put a bit of paper on with saying, hello, I'm doing okay. But it's weirder than that in a way, isn't it?
I think it is. That's an excellent question. Why don't they leave something that is without a doubt? Because you can dismiss feathers, you can dismiss coins. People carry coins, birds have feathers. We can just dismiss these things. But when we find them in unexpected places, or we find them consistently showing up like that, like you were talking about the coins that have a specific birth year, and we're finding those consistently, that makes a big difference. And In those moments, again, you can choose to look at it as a miracle or that it's not. Why not talk to your loved ones? Mom, was that you? Dad, I tell my dad all the time, thanks for the feather, Dad. I'm going to add it to my collection. And I do. I have a huge collection. I'm looking around my office. I've got a bunch on my note board here. I've got a vase full of them. I've got them on top of my shelf and on top of my credenza. And at home, oh my gosh, I've got so many at home just stacked together. I just thank you. Thank you again. Thanks, Dad. That's great. That I loved hearing from you. I was thinking of you and I'm missing you. So we can talk to our loved ones. We can talk to our angels. Hey, Archangel Michael is one of my main guides. And when he shows up for me, I always say thank you. And I got your message and thank you for watching out for me.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great. We do want to acknowledge these things, and that encourages more of the same.
Yeah, but it's been really nice talking about it. I've got a million stories coming to mind, but I don't think we have the time. Different things that I've heard of.
Do you have another quick story? I would love to hear it.
Well, it's not about me. I read about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the psychologist,
Right.
and
The
she was,
several stages of death.
yeah, and she was working on this stuff to do with death, and it was really starting to get her down, and she was thinking of stopping it and starting on something else. And she was at work at this college, walking down the hallway, and there was a woman waiting for her outside her office. But she knew this woman died a year ago. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross opened the door, and the woman followed her in and said to her, "You have to keep working on this thing about death. It's really going to help people. You shouldn't stop." And Elizabeth asked her to write a note out for her so she knew this was real. And so the woman wrote a note for her on a piece of paper. And then she just walked out the door, and she was gone. And Elizabeth has never told anybody what's written on that note. But she said she was going to give up, but that really spurred her on and gave a whole new energy to her work and what she was doing.
Oh, I've never heard of anything like that.
I could tell you one more story. This
Please.
is all stuff I get on my podcast. You talk to so many people, you pick up all these stories. There was this guy who was at a town. There's a place where they have the Mothman. I can't remember the name of the town.
Oh, Point
It's
Pleasant. Point Pleasant,
yeah.
Virginia, perhaps?
So he was investigating it with a friend, and they were both staying at this hotel in different rooms. And they were downstairs at the hotel and bumped into one of his old friends, this guy. And they were chatting, and the bloke that was on my podcast said he said hello to him and shook his hand, and they all went off. The other two went for a drink. And so this man, like a year later, was in a supermarket in New York, I think it was, and saw his wife and said, "Hi, how you doing? I saw him like a little while ago, and we had a really good drink this evening." And she was angry. She said that he died 3 years ago. And he's, "No, it was just a little while ago. We went out for a drink, and my friend was there. We shook hands." So that was a strange one. And apparently that night, that guy who had died didn't say anything about death or ghosts or anything like that. He just turned up for a drink.
Just as solid as you or me.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable. Wow. We hear stories about this so often. I believe every bit of that. Somebody will show up and they seem just as real can be, and then vanish, or we find out later that they had been deceased all this time. That is
Yeah.
wild. Yeah. Any other stories that come to mind?
But now that there's a weird one, there was this is in my book, and this is from, I think, Victorian era, late Victorian era. There was this rich family, and the mother, was having dreams about this really nice big house in the countryside. And she would walk around the rooms and walk up and down the hall and see the whole house. And her husband booked them a holiday out in the countryside, staying in a house. And when she got there, she was like, "This is it. This is the house from my dreams." And she could lead her husband around the house and point out the rooms and tell him what was on the other side of this door or that door. And then the housekeeper came out, and she was like, "Ah, you're the woman who's been haunting my bedroom." So she'd seen her there.
Oh, I love stories like that. So she was really astral projecting. or astral traveling.
Yeah, it must have been. She didn't even know herself. She thought she was just having vivid dreams, I suppose.
Oh my gosh, but the housekeeper actually had seen her. Oh, I love
Yeah.
stories like that. I mean,
And she thought she was a ghost.
well, of course she would. That makes sense. She sees this woman walking around who might not be physical. Wow, that is a great story too. You hear sometimes of those type of things, people who are bilocating or they're having these vivid dreams, and how interesting that someone actually could confirm that.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on, isn't there? There's just too many of these stories, too much stuff happening. And it can't be everybody's making it up and everybody's confused or seeing something and it's a hallucination or they're delusional. There's far too much of it.
Exactly. As the great Jim Harold says, it's too much of a
Hmm.
coincidence to be a coincidence, right? And we know that there's
Yeah.
no coincidences. These things do happen. They happen to any of us, to all of us. You don't have to be special. You don't have to be particularly gifted in spiritual gifts. You don't have to be anyone remarkable. Anybody, everybody can have these type of experiences. And I think the key is to be open to it and to believe and know that, yeah, that could happen to me. I don't have to be Joan of Arc to have a visitation or to have things show up or to have unexplained phenomenon going on around me. Anybody and everybody has the capability to have these miraculous events. We just need to,
Yeah.
yes. These are great stories. Any more from your treasure trove?
Oh boy, there's so many. I talked to a guy who tried to do astral projection and he was starting to get it right and he thought he'd go to his girlfriend's house and he was outside her bedroom window and saw her with one of her friends. And then he went through the wall and they both looked at him and screamed. He quickly shot back to his body and he thought, right, I'm going to see her tomorrow. I won't say a word. And he went over to see her and she was like, we saw a ghost last night. It looked just like you. So that's another little one there. But there was this guy who was taught at the Monroe Institute to do out of body. And he says he can do it now. He teaches this Monroe method. And he said that he would come out of his body and go down the hallway in his house, and it would have wood floor and a white wall. But actually, his floor has a carpet on it and the wall is blue. So he said that's just one of these weird things that shows up. Why would he see a wooden floor and a different coloured wall?
That's interesting. Did he have any theories about that?
Not really. It's just something you get used to, he said, and it's just nobody's really got an explanation for it. But he says he can go out and find lost souls or stuck spirits, whatever you want to call them, and then help them to move on. And he was into this house, and there was a woman there stirring a pot of food, and the whole kitchen looked like the 1950s. And he was talking to her, and he realized that she had died in the 1950s. And she said, well, I'm just waiting for my husband to come home. I don't know why he's so late. I have to keep the food warm. But for her, it seemed like she'd been waiting 2 hours, but actually it had been 50 years. So the perception of time is different. But he managed to talk to her and explain what was happening. And then she moved into the light.
Wow. And then he was able to go back home to his body,
Yeah.
but he helped her. That's amazing. That reminds me of that film. I think it's called The Others with Nicole Kidman, where, oh, I don't want to give the whole thing away, but she finds
Yeah.
her husband who had died in the war. And it was an interesting meeting there on the other side. So, yeah, Dolores Cannon used to say, all the things that you think are possible and things that you don't think are possible really do happen, really are possible. We have to be open-minded to accept it, to wrap your head around it. But these things are real and they really do happen. Now, I don't want to let you go without talking about your podcast and your books. So, your podcast is
Our Paranormal Afterlife. And that, yeah, that's on Amazon and Spotify and everywhere.
all the podcast platforms. Yes. Yeah. And you've interviewed a lot of wonderful people. I was on it as well. And you
Yeah.
interviewed lots of great people. Did you actually get to interview Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
No, no, I haven't.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to. And then your book.
Yeah, that's verified near-death experiences. And it's all about those near-death experiences where somebody is out of body and sees something happen, and then they come back to their body when they're resuscitated and describe what they saw. And people say, but you were dead when that happened. There's no way you could have seen that. So it's some kind of verification that their consciousness left their body. And that's why I called the book Verified Near-Death Experiences.
As opposed to shared near death experiences that Dr. Raymond Moody had talked about before. I mean, it's not been very long ago that he talked about near death or shared death experiences where you actually go through that with someone else who is on their deathbed. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. So these very verified things like, oh, no, you were standing here, you were standing there, you were doing this to my body. This is what happened. So very, very interesting. And you can hear more about that on the Radiate Wellness podcast. I have to look at my schedule to see when that's coming out, but it's going to be coming out in the next few months. And it's been a pleasure talking with you today, Simon. I love the work that you do, the Paranormal Afterlife podcast. And you have any other books, Near Death Experience, your first book?
That's my first book. Yeah, I did write science fiction, but this is the first about this kind of thing.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that can be found out there where all books are found, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Wherever you get your books. Yes. Wonderful. Again, I've been talking with Simon Bown, and thank you so much for sharing your story and keep finding those angel encounters.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you again.
You too. Take care. And next up, we have a voice you may recognize, that of the great Jim Harold, OG podcaster and host of Jim Harold's Campfire, the Paranormal Podcast, the Paranormal Report, and more. Find him at jimharold.com. Certainly one of my podcasting heroes with some great stories of loved ones. Next up, we have the great Jim Harold, OG of the paranormal, and who is a great inspiration for this show and many things that I do. I love all of Jim Harold's work. Hey, Jim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to be on the program. I appreciate it very much, and I love talking about some of the topics we're going to talk about today, angels.
Oh, I love it. And angels can be in so many forms. They can be in feathers on the sidewalk or coins that you find. It can be insects or animals showing up, or they can be sightings and nods from our loved ones. And you've got some great stories to share. What happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had some personal encounters in my main show, Jim Harold's Campfire, the one that most people gravitate towards, where people call their stories. There are the spooky, like demonic stories, but we have a lot of angel stories too. And it's been kind of influenced about some things that have happened to me that are maybe not what you would consider traditional angel story, but I shared some of them with you when we did a recent interview. One of my favorites, I had an uncle who was very, very close to me and like a second dad. Unfortunately, he passed back in 2013. Now, a few years later, I was on a paranormal cruise. I was one of the speakers, which I was very honored to be. And I was going to go into my speaking session. They had a little conference room on the ship, but I had a little bit of a cold. So that particular day, I walked out of the conference room before the session, and I saw one of our attendees, one of the members of the group, playing one of these crane games. And that's where the claw comes down and grabs the money and drops it almost always. But the goal is to get the money. But I thought that really struck me because my late uncle, who was very near and dear to me, he loved those claw games like in stores, like you see with the stuffed animals and stuff. He would drop $10 and maybe win something and then give it to a neighbor kid or something. You know, he didn't want the object. He wanted it for the sport of it. So much so that one year for Christmas, we bought him a little toy crane game. Anyway, so that was like identified with him. And I said, oh, I wish he were here. I wish he were here. And again, it was being played by one of the members of our group. So it really kind of caught my eye. So a woman walks up next to this guy and she cups her hand to her mouth and goes, John, John, my uncle's name, John. And within a few moments, her husband or whoever it was, her companion walked up to her. That was John. But I mean, what are the chances? I have a saying I use, too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. And to me, the fact that, I was thinking very intensely of my uncle, and I think he was acknowledging that and saying, I see you and I love you too. And again, the skeptic will say, oh, mere coincidence, but that name could have been any name, Christy, any name at all. And it was John. So I think that was a message meant for me.
I think so too. Not only was it John, but you were playing one of his favorite games.
Yeah, yeah. I was seeing this guy play this game. I mean, it wasn't like I saw some guy playing a slot machine and somebody walked up. It was like the crane was one of the most, the crane game, kind of an odd thing, but one of the most associated things with him because the thing was, I had an intense thought. I'm like, boy, I wish he were here. And he would doubly love it because he liked to do little things like play lotto and play the football pool. Very kind of low stakes gambling. He was not like a big, like, oh, I'm going to lay $10,000 on some, but just little, $5 here, $10 there. And it would have been right up his alley. He would have loved that thing. And I very intently thought of him. I'm like, wow, I wish he were here. It's such a shame he can't be here, but he was there.
He was there. That's just it. Our loved ones are with us all the time. All it takes is for us to be thinking of them, watching someone play one of their favorite games, or just having them come to mind. Family dinners, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever it is. We're thinking of our loved ones, and they just come even closer when we do that. I do not doubt that that was a wink, a nod, a nudge from your Uncle John. I have no doubt. Right. You have another story, this time about your mom.
Yeah, this was just one of those odd things. See, when I have things happen to me, they're more subtle. There's a joke that goes around my community. Quite a few years ago, another podcaster out there says, oh, that Jim Harold, he's a millionaire. He can get all this great equipment and stuff. And the truth is, I am not a millionaire at all. I'm a middle-class guy. And we kind of made a joke of it in my community. And so much so now, if I post something, well, I went to this and so place, and it's like, you're a millionaire. Though the one community member always jokes with me about, but it's all facetious. I am not a millionaire. But the point is, I'm so much of a millionaire. A lot of times I'll get my office supplies at that well-known place for millionaires, the dollar store. So this was a few years ago when it still was the dollar store, and I was picking up some envelopes and some stuff, and I saw a woman, and this was around a similar time, few years after my mom's death. She passed in 2013 as well. Just a horrible year for me. And this woman looked just like my mom. Same hairstyle, same glasses, same clothing she would wear, same shoes she would wear, same pocketbook she would carry. So much so that if my mom had been alive and I'd been in a store with her, I could easily see myself getting confused and thinking it was her. So anyway, I thought, well, that's weird, but everybody has a double, they say, right? Everybody has their doppelganger. So I went and bought my envelopes and mailing packages or whatever and got in line. And lo and behold, the person in front of me was this woman. And she turns around to me and she has a bottle of Pepsi in her hand. She says, could you open this for me? Now, Christy, I have been in many stores through my life. I'm in my 50s. I've never had that happen before or since. It was just such an odd happenstance. And I opened it for her. And I assumed she was going to pay for it, and she did pay for it. Although I don't do that. I pay for stuff before I start consuming it. And so would my mom, for sure. But the point is that it was just bizarre. And again, that one I could see being more of a coincidence, maybe, but I do kind of think it was my mom saying, hey, I see you. I do think these things happen. And we hear that all the time on the campfire. It could be very subtle things like dimes, or I think you had a story about a feather that you told on my show, or it can be something more like, whoa, it's kind of Twilight Zone-y. So it really is. I think our angels are out there, and we always try to stress that on the campfire, that to me, the paranormal or the supernatural world, sometimes I like that word better, the supernatural world, is a continuum. And it's kind of like our life over here, I believe. I believe there's good, bad, happy, sad. There may be some more sinister energies, and that's where we talk about things like haunted houses, like, more malevolent kind of things. But then I always try to slip in those nice stories, like the angel stories and those kind of things, because my feeling is that's like, people come and get their dessert is like the spooky, scary story. And then I slip in their vegetables, which are the angel stories, because remember that the angels are out there.
I love that. And everybody's got some kind of story like that. Some kind of story like that. Sometimes people will say, nothing ever happens to me. I am as sensitive as a rock. But there was this one time.
Exactly. I say that all the time.
Yeah.
Now, we get some great stories on the campfire. Would you like me to share one more Twilight Zone-y kind of one?
I was hoping you would. I was going to ask you.
I think this woman called in a couple of years ago, but this story dates back to the 80s, pre-cell phones and all of that. We remember that. She was commuting and taking some night classes at college about an hour away from her home, and it was up in New England. It was wintertime, so it was cold, right? So she was driving in her little used car, and lo and behold, it broke down on the freeway. So she pulled over and she's like, well, I got to do something. I'm a person of action. I'm not going to sit here as a sitting duck or a car hit me or something. I'm going to go do something. And she happened to glance down and there was a parallel road and there was what we used to call a service station down there with a garage and it was lit up. And she's like, oh, thank God I'm saved. She kind of crawls over the guardrail down the embankment. She said she really wasn't dressed to go through like a foot of snow, but she's a tough woman. She did it anyway. She goes down there and it's almost like closing time of the place. The guy points at the wall and says, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to be closed. She tells him the situation, but maybe my boss can help you out. And then he lives next door. And all of a sudden, the guy just kind of appears, not materializes in thin air, but he's just like kind of there. She didn't see him walk in or anything. And she tells him the situation. Can you take a look at my car? And he's like, absolutely. Let's go up there. And he looks at it and he said, well, I could fix it, but I can't fix it tonight. But what I can do is give you a tow to, you say you're quite a bit away from home. I could give you a tow to wherever you get your car fixed. Didn't mention money or anything like that. And she said, absolutely. Thank you so much. And then he said, well, he takes her there. And he's kindly, older, fatherly type gentleman. He says, well, you got to get home somehow. I'm glad to take you home. And he's going way out of his way. I mean, we're talking about he's blown a couple hours here between back and forth. And she said, oh, I haven't even asked you what you charge. I don't have any money on me, but I can go inside when they get to her house. I can go inside and get my checkbook. And he said, oh, $20, which was very reasonable for all of his time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's nothing.
So she walks in and gets a checkbook. And he said, I just want you to let your folks know everything is going to be okay. She thought to herself, that was kind of an odd comment. But she gives him the check, thanks him profusely, and just is, grateful because this guy basically saved her, where a lot of people would say, hey, we're closed. That's your problem. I'm sorry. But really went out of his way. So a couple days later, she's going shopping, I think with her mom and her sister. And she says, you know what? Let's take a little detour on the way to the big town here. Let's go past that service station. That man was so nice. I wanted you to see where it was at. And they go past it. And Christy, it is there, but it's boarded up and it looks like it's been closed for at least 10 years.
Wow.
What's that about?
Is wild. Well, my personal take on that is time slip, alternate dimension.
Oh, the thing I got to tell you is that I say some of the best campfire stories don't end with period or exclamation point. They end with a question mark.
Things that make you go,
And those are my favorite. I call them head scratchers. Those are ones where people go, what in the world was that about? We had another one. I didn't tell this when we talked the other day. We had another one with a woman had problems with her car and she was pulled over. Another similar situation. And this guy pulls up in like this dirty Jeep, but he's dressed all in white. And he looks at it and he says, well, your belt's shot. And he says, I can take you back to town and we can get a belt. And she felt very funny about getting in his car. And I'm not recommending anybody do that, but she said, he seems like a very nice person. And she got in the car and it was like really dirty and everything. But they went and got the belt and came back and he replaced it. And he was dressed all in white, which was really weird. Fixed the belt, gave her a business card. And then I think, and this is an old story, so I hope I'm not misstating it, but I believe, she went and looked up and the Jeep and him had both disappeared. And she said she thought that the card said Michael, but she couldn't remember and she threw away the card and she wished she wouldn't have thrown away the card. But there are these stories of when people are in great need. And I know Rosemary Ellen Guiley, one of my favorites, did a great book on this. And I believe she said, angels will show up at that moment when people are in great need. And we've heard it multiple times on the campfire.
That is absolutely true. They will show up in great need. They mostly like to let us make our own mistakes. And for the most part, we do need to ask for help. They're not just going to come in and help us. But if we're in great need, or if it's a time when we are in great danger and it's not our time to go. I know that one time I was driving in downtown Kansas City, there is one interchange that is really tricky. You come into I-35 on the right, and then immediately there are two very big exits on the left, main arteries to town. So if you're wanting to get to Midtown Kansas City, you've got to take one of these two arteries. And so I come in on the right. My next exit is immediately on the left. If I don't take that one, then there's one right after that I really need to take, or else I'll have to go all around the city. And it's rush hour, and it's a dicey proposition anyway. I come in on the right, and I'm praying to Archangel Michael, who's my main guy. Michael, please just get me across this highway. I need to get on Southwest Trafficway, and I don't want to take the next exit, and I certainly don't want to have to miss these. So please, please help. And I get over, and I'm just white knuckling it. I look over, and here's a semi truck that obviously had been in my blind spot. And I look up, there's no way I could have gotten over, Jim, but that I drove through the semi truck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it happened. It defies all physics, logics. And I think that they can help us do things like that. If it's not your time, they can swoop in and save the day, but not always, not always. And you know what I love about these stories, Jim, is everybody seems to have them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think we've all had those near misses.
Mm.
I remember one time getting on the freeway, and I had a very similar, and there was a semi behind me, and I have no idea how I got in without getting hit. And there was nowhere to go. There was nowhere to go. Very similar story. It was like, maybe I misjudged. Maybe it was further away than I thought, or maybe he slowed down. I mean, it was like it was like one of those split-second decisions. And, it's like, I don't know how I did that. Or maybe I didn't do it. I didn't even tell you this one. This is probably the craziest story where I had a narrow miss. Did I ever tell you the story about the drive-by shooting?
Oh my goodness. I think I would have remembered that, Jim.
Okay.
What happened?
Well, this goes back to 1994. I graduated college. I got my first apartment, which was front half of one of these old frame houses. Now, I grew up in a pretty rough area in the city of Cleveland, but this was actually a little bit better area than I grew up in. It was in Slavic Village in Cleveland. So anyway, it was the front half of the house. So at this point, I was dating Dar, who is now my wife, and we weren't even engaged. We were just kind of starting to date. And me, her, and some friends were going to go to Cedar Point, which is the big amusement park out here. It's actually, I think it's the best roller coaster park in the United States, in the world. They've got like a dozen different coasters and some of the biggest and fastest ones. So anyway, stayed out till very late at night. And basically it was maybe from that park to my house was 40 miles and then another 20 miles. So I would have had to travel 80 or 90 miles round trip to drop her off. I'd have to go way east, drop her off, then come back to the center of the city. Because I was in the city proper, she was in the eastern suburbs. So basically what boils down to is this is like 2:30 in the morning. We get to her house. I'm going to drop her off and then have to drive another 30, 40 minutes to get to my house. And it's 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday, not a great time to be driving anyway. And she said, you know what? And she lived with her parents because she was just finishing up grad school. She said, you know what? Let me ask my dad if you can sleep on the couch. Now, I knew these people for maybe 3-4 months. And her dad was like an old school Italian, I mean, he came here from Italy, so he had the Italian accent and scared the hell out of me. And it's like, he was a good guy, but it's just, that intimidation factor. And I'm like, oh, I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. She said, if you drive, you're going to fall asleep, something's going to happen. So anyway, he asked her and I acquiesced and I said, okay. And I slept fine, woke up in the morning, we all had a nice breakfast together and kind of felt, this is my ultimate destination, with this family.
You knew.
So anyway, drove home, I'm all happy, and I pull up in front of my car, and the landlord, this old 8-frame house, the landlord's son lived in the back, and he's facing the house, pointing at it and talking to one of the neighbors. I get out and I'm like, hey, Dave, how you doing? Is everything cool? He's like, well, there's been a drive-by. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's been a drive-by. Whose house got hit? Our house got hit. Get this. This is no BS. I've actually got the shrapnel. I've got the pictures to prove it. 7 rounds of armor-piercing AK-47 went into the house. I had a microwave, probably the first appliance I ever bought. Took a direct hit right in the door. There was a big bullet hole right in the door. I had an avocado gold double door refrigerator that my uncle that I talked about earlier gave me because he was moving too and he couldn't transfer, so he just gave it to me. One side of the refrigerator, through the middle, through a ketchup bottle, and out the other side.
No way.
The police were stunned because, again, that area was getting rougher, but they were stunned. And they said, I guess I wasn't there, but they said, well, what does this guy in the front, what does he do for a living? And they said, well, he's an assistant at a classical music radio station. They probably thought I was some drug kingpin or something. Turns out, and I knew this because I had just signed the papers to leave that place for a couple reasons. One, Dar was over on the east side, 30 miles away, and I found a nice apartment, nicer area and stuff. A little bit more money, but it was a good place. And I had signed the papers, but it was going to be a month till I got there. So I'd also told her that next door, there were some teenagers who were bad news. They seemed to be unsupervised. I said, that's not good. And I think they moved in after I did. I said, they're not good. It's not going to be a good scene. Something's going to happen. And she's, Miss Suburbanite, and I grew up in the city, so I kind of could sense things and know things. I was a little more street smart, believe it or not. People are amazed by that, but because I look like Joe Suburbanite, and maybe I am now. But anyway, I had a bad sense about them. Turns out they had a light blue house. We had a dark blue house. The orange, if you've ever seen the street lights that have the kind of that orange look to them, well, their house looked white. Our house looked blue. They hit the wrong house.
Oh my.
Turns out that they crossed a motorcycle gang.
Good look.
So now, again, the naysayers could say that was a coincidence, but I very rarely spent a night away from home. I think that was only the time I lived there. I only lived in there 8 or 9 months, but I think I only spent like 2 nights away from home the whole time I lived there.
Yeah.
And I was on the upper level. The rounds hit on the lower level. But what if somebody was lying in wait looking for somebody to move? And I decided I was thirsty and wanted to go downstairs and get a drink of water. Who knows? So I think there were some powers at play to try to help there.
I think so too. That is wild. And that kind of reminds me of a story when, gosh, this was years ago, at least 20 years ago, because it predates my daughter. And my ex and I were going to go to a play at this local university. And across from that university was this little bar named Mike's Tavern, where it's the university district. And that was my college hangout, was Mike's. It was a disgusting, filthy dive bar. And we were sitting.
Sounds like exactly the right place to be during college, though.
It was like I had my mail delivered there. No, not really, but it felt like it. I was there all the time. And so we're sitting in this one booth on the street side of the bar, having a drink before going to this play. We go to the play. We come back to the bar to have a nightcap and meet up with some people. And the place where we had been sitting was no more. There was a huge hole.
Wow.
Where we had been sitting, because a car driven by someone who was on drugs, he rammed through the building and would have rammed right where we were sitting.
Oh, gosh. Thank
goodness we had this play to go to. And thank goodness we didn't decide to blow it off. And that it was, very interesting. That type of thing doesn't really happen very often. So
yeah. It makes you think. It really makes you think.
It makes you think, somebody watching over us, making sure that we're not there when something bad is going to go down. I do believe that these things happen all around us. And I love the campfire show because we do hear many positive, uplifting stories along with the spooky stuff, along with the also get our yummy vegetables too. And I think that helps us understand the true meaning of the paranormal. It's the supernatural. It's more than natural. It coexists alongside us, and it's just there for all of us. And I have to say, I've had some of your storytellers on the Real Life Angel Encounters podcast, and a couple of their stories made it into the book, Real Life.
Excellent. Excellent.
Mm-hmm. Because, there's the spooky side of the paranormal, but there's also the uplifting and
Yes.
side. And all of it coexists under the same umbrella. And, it just lets us know there's so much more to us than we think there is. And we are never alone. None of us are ever alone. So
I agree.
thank you so much for spending time with me today to tell your stories. These are really great stories, and you hear so many things. You know what? It's funny. Before I let you go, Jim, right before you, I had Simon Bown on.
Oh, yes. I've interviewed Simon before. He's great.
He's great. Yes, I was on his show. You were on his show. He was on my show. He's been on your show. It's a big, happy family. The circles on the Venn diagram of podcasters in this realm is very small and very well connected. So,
well, and I agree. I think a rising tide lifts all boats, and there are enough stories out there for everyone. And thank you for giving me the space to share mine today. And I hope everybody, after they listen to your show, they also take out some time to check out Jim Harold's Campfire. We're doing it on video now too, on YouTube and Spotify, and the audio, of course. And next month, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but July, the end of July of this year, I will celebrate my 20th anniversary of podcasting.
That's amazing. What are you doing to celebrate?
I don't know yet. I should have already figured that out. We'll probably have a special episode. I might do a live stream and some things, but it's a chance to kind of look back and realize how much podcasting has changed, how much it has grown. And as far as I know, my other show, the Paranormal Podcast, one of my other shows, the Paranormal, is the longest running paranormal podcast on the internet. It was so early I got that name. There were shows before me, but they've gone away, and there were shorter shows that started shortly after me, and they continue. But as far as I know, that show's the longest running paranormal podcast on the internet. And that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool to know.
That is impressive that you got in so early that you got to snag that name.
Yeah, it's a good name. It's a good name. It's helped.
And you've got a Plus Club as well. I'm a member.
Yes. If you've not heard of me, don't even think about the Plus Club. Listen to the free stuff. Jim Harold's Campfire, the Paranormal Podcast, and the Paranormal Report, which is the show I do with my wife, which is weekly paranormal news. So check those free shows out first. But if you say, man, I want more Campfire, then they can check out my Plus Club at jimharold.com/plus. But I highly recommend, don't even worry about that. Listen to the free stuff. There's plenty of free stuff. And then if you become a super fan, we'd love to have you in the Plus Club. But get the free stuff first.
There's so much content out there, Jim. I don't know when you sleep, honestly. You have so much out there.
Yeah, I'm blessed because it's been my full-time job for the last 13 years this month. It might even, actually, the anniversary is either just passed or it's just coming up. 13 years full-time, and, I treat it very seriously. It is my job, but I'm also, the cool thing about it's my job, but I'm genuinely interested in it. I genuinely enjoy talking about these things. I think it'd be kind of tough to do something for 20 years if you were bored with it, and I'm not bored with it at all because, to your point, there's so many stories out there and there's so many experiences.
And the Campfire, from what I understand, came about as kind of a fluke.
Yeah. Basically, I was doing the Paranormal Podcast, and one week I didn't have a guest. And I wanted to post a show, and I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't I just do listener stories? And it seemed to be such a hit with people. I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but this is a separate show. I mean, even though the Paranormal Podcast has been around longer, and I think it's a fine show, it's more of an interview style where we have guests and those kind of things. People really do gravitate towards the personal stories, and that's where Jim Harold's Campfire comes in.
Well, I met a neighbor and very dear friend through the Campfire.
Excellent.
That you've got a
That is
Facebook
awesome.
group, Jim Harold's Campfire Facebook group. And so I had posted on the Facebook group about this experience that my dad had at a huge sprawling WPA era high school here in Kansas City, where he was night watchman when I was a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so my neighbor / friend saw this post. She said, you must be in Kansas City. That's not far from my house. It's not far from my house. What part of town are you? I'm in Brookside. I'm in Brookside. We messaged each other. What road do you live on? I told her, and she said, that's the road that I live on.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You never know. I had a very interesting thing. It's funny how that works. I'll just tell you a real quick story. About a week ago, the Astonishing Legends guys, they're great, and they're always promoting my shows. I really appreciate it, and I try to return the favor. And if you haven't checked them out, Astonishing Legends, check it out. And someone that works with them, it does another show in their network of shows. Rich Haddam emailed me or texted me and just said, hey, I wanted to thank you. This listener connected. She just loves the show, and she's a super fan, and it's because of your show she heard me interviewed. And that was so funny. When he texted me, I was recording my campfire show, and not 2 calls later, somebody from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. And I said, how'd you find out about the shows? And she said, oh, Astonishing Legends. So you see how it works. You see how it works.
The Venn diagram. It just overlapping everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, and I have to tell you too, that during the pandemic, my angels started tapping me on the shoulder saying, you need to spread our message. I said, it's wonderful. I've already done a whole series on YouTube called 52 Weeks of Angel Connection, which every week I talked about a different being, ascended master angel. And they said, okay, well, that's great, but it needs to be a podcast. And I said, no, I already have a podcast. I have a group practice that I run, and I'm a single mom. And so they're like, fine, that's fine. And a little bit of time went by, and they tapped me again. They said, okay, you really need to start this podcast. And I said, I don't really want to. And they said, you need to do this. People need to know that there's hope out there. People need to know about us, and we need to be connecting with you guys. And I said, well, fine, then just show me the way to do this. And they said, look at Jim Harold's Campfire. The kind of what we're thinking is that real people are telling these real stories. Real people have these events that happen to them, and everybody needs to know about it, because we need our angels with us now. We need to be working with them now. And so I thought, well, that actually is crazy enough. It just might work.
Yeah. It's weird how things come to you. I mean, I can actually remember where I was sitting, it's in our old house and that we had. And it's just like that moment changed my life, because I'm convinced if I wouldn't have come up with the campfire concept and done a campfire show, that I would not be doing this full time, and that it would not have the reception. And just that one moment, but I think that there was more than me involved in that brainstorming session.
That's what I'm hinting at. That's what I'm saying, Jim, because as smart as we are, sometimes these brilliant ideas don't even come from us.
Yep.
And just being able to pay attention to that and act on it. You know, I'll tell one more quick story. And that is that working intuitive, I was doing a reading for someone who had lost her mom, and she was devastated. And so I connected her with her mom. I was able to deliver her mom's messages. Her mom incidentally said, well, this is wonderful being on the other side now, because I can be with my daughter here in Kansas City. I can be with my daughter here in Washington, D.C. I can be with my family in Mexico, all at the same time. So it was a wonderful connection to be made. About a year later, this mom, the same one, kept waking me up in the middle of the night. About 3:00 in the morning, she would wake me up and say, you need to talk to my daughter about taking vitamins. And I thought, that is the strangest thing. And I thought, oh, that was weird. You know, as you say, too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. I always say, once a fluke, twice a coincidence, 3 times do it. She was waking me up every night. And finally I said, okay, fine, I will call your daughter. And I called her and I said, this is going to sound crazy, but your mom says that you need to take vitamins. And she said, well, my husband and I were just talking, and we decided we were going to start our family, and that I would begin by taking prenatal vitamins. So message delivered. Mom started leaving me alone, but I knew that that was definitely something that she needed to have, that she needed to know. So we never know when these things come in. If they mean something, why not act on them? Why not?
That's right. That's right. Yep. Well, you got to remain open to it, because I think the messages are out there.
They're out there. We just have to be open. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today, Jim. It has been a pleasure. I love all of these stories, and they really do give us hope.
Indeed, they do. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the program.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and follow, and be sure to share this episode. The more people who know about this podcast, the more great story submissions we get. Have a story to share? Email your own real-life angel encounter to angelencounterspodcast@gmail.com, or visit radiatewellnesscommunity.com/real-life angel encounters podcast. or join our Facebook group and continue the discussion. Want to know what your angels and loved ones have to tell you? Schedule an appointment with me at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. A special thanks to James Wheeler for the original music and to Tiffany Baumgarten for the logo design.